What up, everybody? This is the Dr. Football Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Dennis Teehan, recording from my medical office in Dedham, Massachusetts. With me, as always, the CEO of Hedge Better, Justin Fein, coming to you live from the HB Studios in Braintree, Mass. What is going on, Justin? How are you, my man?
I'm doing well, man. Hanging in there. It's kind of turned into a nice spring day, a little bit, you know.
Gorgeous. So it's gorgeous.
So yeah, no, enjoying the weather. And the Patriots draft is finally come and gone. So we finally have some of those results that we've been talking about forever. So I'm
we got a lot
to break
to talk
it down.
About. We're going to break down the whole draft class today. We're going to get back. We did a little kind of micro episode last week where we talked a little bit about Drake May. We're going to get a little bit more into the Drake May pick, which is, I think, one of the biggest moments really in the franchise in years. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to go kind of step by step and go through all these draft picks, recap the first round in a little greater depth. And at some point, we're going to share our expectations because we've got a pretty clear picture on what we're dealing with here with this 2024 Pats squad. And, you know, that's not to say there couldn't be, you know, an addition here or there, but I think the draft is over. Free agency is over. We kind of know what they did, and we can talk a little bit about what we're going to expect. How's that sound, my man?
That sounds great. I'm looking forward to it. Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. We're going to begin with the kickoff, the open and take to set the table for the rest of the podcast. And I want to begin just going back to that number 3 Drake May pick, Justin. Yep. And I think that as this week has passed, it's been exactly 1 week now since the Patriots have picked Drake May with the number 3 pick in the draft. And it came out this week that there were actually 2 legitimate trade offers for this pick from the Vikings and the Giants. The Giants offered the number 6 pick and a first rounder next year. And the Vikings offered 3 first-round picks for the number 3 pick and a couple pick swaps that were favorable to the Vikings. So they were legitimate trade offers, but obviously the Patriots didn't take them. And I think it opens the door for us to question is, 1, should they have taken those offers? Did the Patriots do the right thing by sticking and picking with Drake May? And for all the people that thought the Patriots were going to trade this pick, what I do want to just point out about this whole thing is, like, I think the Patriots were being honest when they said they wanted a Godfather offer for this pick, because both of these offers are legitimate, credible offers, but what they aren't is Godfather offers. And the Patriots wanted a Godfather offer. And when they didn't get one thing, and this is a fact that you can look at, they picked Drake May with 5.5 minutes left on the clock. Yep. And I don't even think the Bears did that with Caleb Williams. So the Patriots, I think, were very invested in May. I think they knew what they were doing going into that draft, and they weren't budging unless someone knocked their socks off. And I 100% that think that was the right thing for them to do. You had to take a gamble on a quarterback. You needed one. This kid's a great kid to take a gamble on. Justin, your thoughts on, did the Patriots do the right thing by passing on 2 trade offers on draft day?
I mean, unfortunately, you know, we're not going to know if they did the right thing till some time, right? Like, it's one of those things we can just speculate right now. But what I do like to, you know, to the point that you've made in previous episodes is that the Patriots clearly had conviction what they wanted to do with this pick, right? Like, they knew to the point of, hey, we either need a groundbreaking trade offer, something that we can't refuse, or we know who our guy is, we know who we want to target, we know he'll be there, and we're taking him, right? And to that extent, I like that the Patriots were decisive, they were confident, and they knew what they wanted. Now, if Drake May fizzles out, you know, we're going to be sitting here going, why don't they trade back with the Giants, take someone like Michael Penix and add another first round pick, right? And there's always going to be those what ifs depending on what happens. But to say that they had conviction, they went out and they took Drake May, I think is what we were both looking for. And I think it gives us confidence that hopefully, you know, they see something in this guy that made it worth turning down those very attractive, very legitimate trade offers. And so that's even making me a little bit more confident about
I mean, look, hindsight is always 2020. So you're always going to be able to look back 5 years from now and say what was the right move or the wrong move. Right. But I mean, I honestly think right now, you know, whatever happens with Drake May's career, I do think it was the right thing to stick and pick right here. And, you know, because, you know, you got to gamble on one of these young quarterbacks and you could kick the can down the road to next year. You might be taking a bigger gamble next year. You go out and you win 6-7 games this year without Drake May. You fill in some holes on this roster. You don't have a quarterback. You're a mediocre team. You're picking in the middle of the round. Now you're gambling on what? A middle of the round quarterback. Next year's Bo Nix. Next year's, Mac Jones. You know what I mean? So at some point, you got to take a gamble, plant your flag, and say, this is our guy. And I love that they did that with this kid. I think he's got tremendous physical talent. I think he's got psychologically good traits that are going to help him grow and help him develop into a franchise quarterback. But if it doesn't work out, I can tell you right now, I'm not going to be looking back, pointing the finger saying, oh, they should have taken that trade. They should have taken that trade. That's hindsight. The reality is right now, you can mark it down. I think they did the right thing. I say stick and pick was the right move.
Yeah. And, to the point of, you don't know when the Patriots are going to get another opportunity to pick this high, right? I mean, we don't know what's going to happen moving forward. It's we even saw that with the Falcons and Michael Penix, right? Taking him at number 8 because they say, well, we think we're not going to be picking at 8 or below any time in the near future, right? So it's kind of the same mentality here. It was like they had a guy, they identified him, they knew that this 3rd overall pick is hopefully going to be, a rare occurrence because they hope to improve and hopefully be picking outside the top 5 and 10 moving forward. So they did what they had to do. And, they took a guy that, look, there was a lot of speculation whether he was the second best, even potentially maybe the first best. We don't really know, right? To me, there was no clear standout. So you had a guy, you saw the talents, you had a vision for him, you went and you took him. And I love it. I think it was a vote of confidence in Drake May, and I think it exudes confidence to the rest of us that we made the right decision.
Absolutely. And let's not forget, Justin, who won the Super Bowl this year? The Kansas City Chiefs. What did we say about them all last season? They're a flawed team, a flawed roster. What do they have? They have a franchise quarterback. So you can sit here. I mean, you can try and build the 49ers. You can build this great team and plug in a mediocre quarterback. That's one way to do it. That's really hard to do it. The fastest, most surefire way to guarantee yourself a decade of success, a decade where you're consistently a playoff team, is to draft the next guy, the next quarterback. So if you've got a hunch, if you've got that conviction, you have to take that chance. And that's why I love what the Patriots did. And it's also, by the way, what I love what the Atlanta Falcons did, but we're going to get to that one later. Okay. Any more thoughts on this number three pick, Justin, before we move on, or ready to move on to the next topic?
Yeah, let's do it.
So further, let's talk a little bit about the rest of the draft class, and I want to talk specifically, just go pick by pick and share our thoughts on what we kind of thought about each and every one of these guys, and what the Patriots did with the rest of the draft. Because we recorded last time, it was on Friday, so we hadn't seen the remainder of the draft. So I guess we can start with the second round pick. Polk is his name, and I got to say, being quite honest with you, I don't love this pick. And like you just alluded to, none of us know what these guys are going to be. And if this guy turns into the next great receiver, hey, kudos to you, Elliot Wolf. You plucked this guy out of nowhere. But I saw Ladd McConkey on the board. I saw a couple other guys on the board that have pretty good pedigrees. I see this guy that they drafted as a guy that isn't particularly fast, isn't particularly big, was not really someone that I thought was even on the radar. They traded down, which I hated, because they had Ladd McConkey sitting for them there at 34. And I know he's a little injury history, but he's the kind of guy that I think is having a lot of success right now. I mean, I can't say you don't know what's going to happen. Obviously, didn't love this pick for the second round pick. I did love that they drafted a receiver because it helps May, but I just didn't like the guy they drafted.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat where, from what I've seen, there's a couple things to like about this, this Jalen Polk guy. Obviously he's not expected to be a world beater by any means, right? But I think the thing that was very interesting to me was if you were targeting a wide receiver at that point, and we've talked about the need for a wide receiver, I just didn't really understand the move to trade down, right? Like whether you took Ladd McConkey or somebody else, because I believe after they traded down, I think 2, if not 3 receivers went off the board. Ladd McConkey and 1 or 2 other people.
Yeah, a couple went off the board. That's exactly right. They traded down 4 picks and several receivers got taken in that time.
Exactly. So I look at that and I say, well, for a team that's really starving for talent at the wide receiver position, was it really worth the trade back? So I didn't really get that. I hope Jalen Polk works out. But, if one of those guys that went before him, winds up hitting and being a great receiver and, a franchise caliber receiver, then we're going to look back and we're going to say, wow, you had the pick right there and you unnecessarily traded back for it. So I hope they really see something in this kid that gave them the confidence to do that. They obviously traded back knowing that they were going to take him and being okay with taking him over Ladd McConkey and some of those other guys that potentially went. So yeah, I hope they got this right. But my gut at the beginning, when I first saw them trade down, was, what the hell are we doing? This isn't a team that can be affording to trade down.
In a sense, it was very, I hate to say this, but it was very Belichickian, right? Like trading down and plucking some guy out that like no one was expecting anyone was going to take it anytime around that pick. It was very Belichickian. It was very reminiscent of some of the things Belichick had to do. And to your point, Teehan Coleman went on 33, McConkey went on 34, and then a defensive tackle, pair of defensive tackles went at 35 and 36. But Leggett went at 32. They could have traded up if they liked one of these guys. There was a run on receivers at that point. Who knows? The one thing I keep telling myself when I look at this guy and I look at his lack of like overwhelmingly impressive physical attributes, like he ran like a 4.5 something 40, kind of pedestrian. Hey, Pua Nakua had a 4.57 40 last year at the combine. So if they go ahead and they pull the next guy out of their hat with this guy, then you know what? I'll be happy to eat those words. But I just didn't love the way they did that. I would have preferred if they traded up and not down. I would have preferred if they brought in someone that was a little faster. I would have preferred if they brought in someone that had a little bit more of a pedigree. Just my 2 cents on that one. Okay, now the third round pick, on the other hand, and again, I'm no scouting expert, but I like this guy, and I'm going to tell you why. Because he was buried on that Penn State roster. Teehan Coleman buried on that roster with a first-round pick, Ola Fashanunu, on the other side. And no one was paying attention to this kid. And this kid has the talent and the pedigree to play left tackle. He just never got the chance to because the other guy was there. Right. I think this guy's a distressed asset at a position of need. I kind of like that they took I would say kind of like a home run swing kind of gamble on this third-round pick.
Yeah. We knew coming into this, right? We said quarterback, receiver, O-line, those are the holes, right? And that's exactly how they addressed it. They went quarterback, they went receiver, then they went O-line. And I actually, for the same reason you just said, I love that they took him, because this is a guy that, for all intents and purposes, if he was on another roster and didn't have to compete with somebody like Fashanu, like, who knows where he could have gone, right? Like, this could have been like a mid-high second round pick potentially. So yeah, I love the fact that they kind of identified the fact that he might be a little bit of a diamond in the rough. He was a little bit overshadowed, and maybe they got some really good value in the third round.
I mean, I feel like you see this a lot where a top level college program has two really good players at the same position. Yeah. And one of them, kind of gets a little bit buried. I mean, I think of, this is kind of an extreme example of that, but I think of Matt Castle, who came in and ended up having a better pro career, I would say, than Matt Leinart for sure ever did. He never saw the field in college because Leinart was a Heisman winner and sort of the man. And it turned out Castle was probably a better quarterback, certainly a better pro quarterback than Leinart ever was. But you see these examples all the time where guys get buried behind. I mean, look at Brady. That's a great example too, with Drew Benson, right? So I like the pick. I think it was a high upside pick. I think, taking a couple swings for the fences at that left tackle position, frankly, the way they handle free agency, it's probably the best they can hope for. I will say, Justin, I really wish they had brought in a left tackle, another tackle in free agency this year, because I feel like it just would have taken so much pressure off of them in this draft, and they would have had such fewer holes to fill. They really should have brought in another tackle.
Yeah, and hopefully one of these guys pans out, in the rest of the guys that they got in that offensive line room, kind of figure it out this year, and we're able to say, all right, well, no harm done. But you're right. I mean, they just brought in a rookie quarterback. Their offensive line play has been a little shaky in the past. And whether Drake May plays this year, or at all or not, whether he plays early in the year, late in the year, doesn't play at all. Like, you definitely want a good, sturdy offensive line in front of that rookie quarterback whenever he does come in. And so,
right.
yeah, you know.
And that segues right into the fourth round pick, Layden Robinson. Again, this is another high kind of home run swing kind of pick, a guy that was supposed to go in the second round, kind of fell a little bit. I actually love this pick too, because I think that anything they can do to build depth on that offensive line and take some chances to bring in some pieces on that line, I'm 10,000% supportive of. I think it's going to help Drake May's development. First 4 picks all on offense. Actually, first 5 picks or 6 picks all on offense. But I love this pick of Coleman, because I think that Layden Robinson, because I think that he, again, he's a high upside kind of guy.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, from what I'm seeing on him, the guy's got some work to do in the pass protection game, but he seems to be a real sturdy run blocker. And I think especially when you have a rookie quarterback back there, if at whatever point this season, you're gonna have to rely on that run game. You know what I mean? Like, you need to have a well balanced offense. You need to be able to establish the run, right? You can't have to rely on your rookie quarterback to go out there and sling it 50 times to win a ball game, right? So, I think they help balance their offensive line. They help bolster their run game. And like you said, they added some depth.
I will say this, Justin, about this, is that this pick does make me question what Cole Strange's future is in New England. And I think last year they drafted 3 guards in the mid rounds. That was Nsidi Sow and Antonio Mafi. Both at times showed something last year. They both look like they can play in this league. Now they draft another guard in the 4th round. I really wonder if Cole Strange, in fact, I'm going to call it, I wouldn't be surprised if Cole Strange is a training camp cut this year.
And that would be super unfortunate, because not only was he high draft capital, but he was a reach, right? He was a big reach. So,
he was a reach.
Yeah, that would really be a shame. And I think too, like, from what we've seen from him so far, like, I don't think I'm not ready to call for his head, but I haven't been super impressed by Cole Strange either.
Yeah, absolutely not impressed with him. And I think that, you look at the way this team has drafted guards the last 2 years. That's the 4th guard they drafted in 2 seasons. So
right.
They are absolutely, I think, setting the stage for Cole Strange to really have to fight for his job this offseason. I don't think Cole Strange has been all that great. I really don't. I think he's been average at best. I think if he was a 4th round pick, which is what he should have been, I'm not sure he really even sees the field that much the last 2 seasons, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and I'm sure he's feeling the pressure and the heat now too. I mean, one of the reasons why you bring guys in is to not only add depth or to replace, but to create competition too, right? Competition makes cream rise to the top. So, you gotta put a little bit of a fire under some of these guys who are expected to produce, but maybe haven't produced to their full potential yet.
Next pick, Justin, was about six picks later. The Patriots took Javon Baker, wide receiver from Central Florida. Love this pick. He's a cocky guy. He's arrogant. Yeah. He's got a great attitude. He has an interesting history. He was a transfer from Alabama. I think he came in to Alabama in Mac Jones's draft class, coincidentally. And a lot went wrong in his college career. But he's a guy that I think, again, another distressed asset, high upside guy. Love this 4th round pick of Javon Baker.
I do too. I love when a guy makes me feel confident in him, right? And that quote after the draft, get your popcorn ready in the stands. I make people in wheelchairs stand up. Like this is the type of guy who, that level of confidence and cockiness is honestly something that I like to see, especially if you can back it up. And I'm really hoping that this is a guy who comes in with something to prove, and he's ready to talk that talk and walk that walk. I really do like it, because you know what? I mean, I know it's, each team, each player is different, but you don't get a lot of that kind of exuding confidence and cockiness from Patriots players, I think.
Oh,
you don't, like, especially in the past under Belichick, right? That's kind of been like a no-no. And I kind of love the fact that this kid comes in and is just ready to make a statement. Like, to me, that was refreshing.
I agree. And I think that they could probably use someone with an attitude like his. I really do. Like, they need someone that's going to come in and kind of stir things up a little bit and bring a little bit of cockiness, a little bit of attitude. I mean, this offense has just been so dead and tepid for like the last really 4 years.
Yeah.
A kid like this, I think, can bring an edge or an attitude that I think will have some value to them. And if he can play, he's got to be able to back it up with what he's doing on the field. Their next pick, 6th round, love it. Joe Milton, pick of the draft. Okay, pick of the later rounds of the draft. Love that they took a gamble on this guy. I'm going to tell you a few reasons why I love this pick.
Yeah.
First and foremost, he's a high upside guy, right? He can throw the ball through a barn. I mean, he's got some real issues. There's a reason why he was a 6th round pick. He couldn't hit the side of it, but he could throw it through the barn, right? All right, but I love that he has arm talent, and I think that to be drafting a guy in the 6th round with this kind of arm talent, that's a great pick right there. I love that he is of a similar skill set and body habitus to Drake May. And it reminds me a little of Bledsoe and Zolak, right? Where Zolak had value to the Patriots beyond what he had to other teams because he was kind of cut from the same cloth as Bledsoe was. Mm-hmm. And I think Joe Milton and Drake May, similar size, similar build, similar attributes. I think that's a good thing. And I think that will make him a useful backup. I like that he can be a scout quarterback for Josh Allen. I think that's going to have value to them this year because they've had trouble stopping Josh Allen historically. So overall, I love this pick of Joe Milton in the 6th round. I think it's another swing for the fences, home run type pick.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the kid, he's built like Predator. I mean, the guy is he is just jacked, big dude, fast, athletic, has an arm and a half on him. Obviously, to your point, right? Super rough around the edges. Reason he went in the 6th round, has to work on some things like his accuracy and like his pocket presence. But I mean, he's a project. And to your point, you don't know what you got until, they kind of come to camp and get to work and start doing their thing. So I love bringing someone like him in that adds a level of competition to the quarterback room, right? I love somebody like him whose athleticism represents like an upside that a lot of quarterbacks don't have. And then, to your other point, like I love the fact that he can kind of come in and fill that scout role for some of the other quarterbacks in the league that, that we've struggled with, like Josh Allen, who we're going to have to see twice a year.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I wonder too, and I think this is going to be a real litmus test. And I think this is going to be one of the places where Drake May succeeded, where Mac Jones failed. But I will say, drafting that second quarterback in the same class, it does kind of put a little bit of pressure on Drake May.
Right.
And Mac Jones didn't really like having Bailey Zappi yipping at his heels. It obviously was something I think, let's face it, in retrospect, Mac Jones handled terribly. That was probably a reflection of some of the psychological traits that led Mac Jones to be an outright disaster here as a quarterback. How is Drake May going to handle the pressure of having Joe Milton drafted in the same class he is? Because my sense of this kid, and I'm talking about May now, is that he's going to be able to handle it. Like, I don't think this is going to be an issue for Drake May like it was for Mac.
I completely agree. Drake May just strikes me as the guy, he strikes me as being very positive, very upbeat, like someone who would welcome the competition and embrace Joe Milton in the quarterback room, and look at it as a positive, not tuck his tail and kind of complain, right? And I know there is a subtle difference that I do think it's worth pointing out, right? I mean, having somebody come in the same draft class as you before you've had a chance to even step on the field and prove yourself, that's right, fair, is different. Whereas, Mac goes out, he has what we consider to be a really good, promising rookie year. And then we go in the next year and bring somebody else in. I think that's a little bit different than drafting somebody in the same draft class, but same type of, when it all comes down to it, I think it really does, I think it really will play out differently because I do think Drake May will handle it differently. And Drake May just, even just seeing him in non-football related things like his commercials, his interviews, his pre-draft, skits and all that stuff. Like the guy really does just strike me as like a very positive, upbeat, like emotionally stable, like mentally tough dude.
Agreed. Agreed 1,000%. I mean, I'll put it this way too. Like if you can't handle having a little bit of competition with another quarterback in your own locker room, how are you going to handle 3rd and 7 in the Meadowlands in October with 2 minutes left in the game or something like that? Like, I mean, these guys have to be mentally tough. Mm-hmm. And that was one of Mac Jones's undoing, was that when it really came down to it and things weren't easy for him, right? That background
Right.
at Alabama, had a lot going for him. When he came to New England and he didn't have a lot going for him, and he had a lot of adversity, non-supportive coach, not a lot of talent around him. Difficult things, a lot of things that went wrong. Fans chanting Zappy's name, right?
Yeah.
Matt crumbled under that pressure, and I think that that's a real reflection of why he failed as an NFL quarterback so far to this point. And I think that May is going to be very different in how he handles that pressure. So I don't see that as a problem. But since we brought up Zappy's name, I want to ask one more question about this pick. Where does this pick leave Bailey Zappi? And is Bailey Zappi going to be on this team? What does his quarterback room look like? I think it's a safe bet. Brissett makes the team, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if May is going to be the starter this year or not, but we can talk about that in a second. But I guess my first question is Zappi on this roster? Because I'm going to tell you something. I'm no Zappi fan, but given the circumstances they're in, where you got a rookie quarterback in May, you got Brissett, who's an older guy, it might not be a bad thing to keep a third guy around who has started and won a few NFL games before. Especially, you look at the last year, quarterbacks dropped like flies. There are a lot of quarter teams that got down to their third quarterback. So I don't think it's a bad thing to have Zappi on this roster. So frankly, as much as I've not liked Zappi at times, I do think it would be smart to keep him on this roster, run with a 3-man quarterback or even a 4-man quarterback. If you don't think you can get Milton on the practice squad, run with that and keep him in there for a rainy day, in your quarterback room for a rainy day.
Yeah, I don't hate keeping Bailey Zappi in the roster at all. I mean, I do question whether you take 4 quarterbacks in the active roster, right? And if you don't, to your point, right, who's more likely to clear waivers, Bailey Zappi or Joe Milton, right? I would have said Bailey Zappi before. I mean, he obviously cleared waivers last year when they did it, but then he kind of went out and showed that, hey, he could potentially be a viable second or third string quarterback for some team, right? So like, I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't clear waivers. So I'm going to be very interested to see what they do there. I mean, what do you think? Do you think it's likely they carry 4 quarterbacks in the active roster?
The last time I think they carried 4 quarterbacks was in Brady's rookie year. They kept Brady, or maybe it was 2001, one of those years, 2000 or 2001.
Yeah.
They kept Brady. They had Heward, they had Bledsoe, and I think they kept, I want to say John Freeze around as well, or another one of those career backup guys. Look, I mean, it's going to be a tough decision in training camp this year. I will say part of it, I think you have to look at too, is if you get in a situation where it's Zappi versus Milton, who can you live with losing, right? You know what Bailey Zappi's ceiling is. You don't know what Joe Milton's ceiling is. So It might be hard to get rid of Joe Milton for that reason. And that's why I wonder if they are just going to suck it up and keep 4 quarterbacks this year. And don't forget, Bill Belichick always kept a couple roster spots for special teams. And there's no guarantee that Mayo and this new regime is going to be quite as obsessed with special teams as Belichick was. So you might have more of a space on your roster potentially to keep an extra quarterback. At the end of the day, I'd hate for them to throw Zappi away, and then Brissett gets hurt, May gets hurt, and you're starting Joe Milton when you have a guy that could potentially at least be okay in an NFL game. But if that's what it comes down to, I don't think I'm cutting Joe Milton because he's got too much upside.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment too. I think you gotta kind of keep Joe Milton. But I guess I look at it and I say, like, you brought in 2 rookie quarterbacks, right? I would like to find out one way or another, what they're made out of at some point, and if that means that, hey, if something happens to Jacoby Brissett and that means you got to turn to one of the rookies, I'm okay with it. I really am, because by the same token, it's like, look, yes, could this year potentially turn out better than expected for the Patriots? 100%. But if you're looking at this as being like another kind of rebuild year, right? Long shot to make the playoffs type of situation, which a lot of people are looking at that for them, then I don't mind using this year to establish baselines and to establish, expectations and determined potential for some of these guys that they brought in. So if they want to say, hey, we're getting rid of Bailey Zappi because we're not so much worried about having a competent quarterback to come in a pinch for a playoff run or in a big game, and we more so want to have guys on the roster that we can test out and see what we got, then I'm okay with that. I really am.
Yeah. It will be interesting to see how they handle this. It's going to be one of the training camp positions that's really going to be worth watching. Okay. And then one other draft observation I thought was interesting that I'm going to ask you, Justin, for your draft grade, overall grade on this draft.
Okay.
I was shocked the Patriots did not draft a kicker somewhere in this draft. They didn't sign a kicker. They didn't draft a kicker. They signed a guy today. His name is Joe Sly. I don't know much about him. I don't know if he's like a legit, credible guy or not. But as of right now, it looks like there's at least a pretty good chance they're rolling with Chad Ryland again. Your thoughts? How do you feel about that? I mean, are we going to, I don't know. I thought they'd bring someone in to compete with him, if nothing else.
Well, if this is this Joey Sly? I think if it's Joey Sly, I think he's been around the league for a little bit, right? So
he has a long time.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously they felt the need to bring in a veteran presence as a backup, right? I think last year with Ryland, we obviously saw that the kid's got a big leg. I think we were all a little disappointed with some of his misses throughout the course of the year, right? But Ryland came in with big draft capital for a kicker. You know what I mean? And
huge.
That we went out on a limb and we drafted him high. So I don't hate giving the kid another year before you potentially move on from him, right? I mean, you'd hate to think that we just wasted that draft pick. I don't hate bringing him in as long as you got another stable veteran on the roster to kind of come in.
It feels like they're going all in with Chad Ryland again to kind of write last year off as like a rookie thing and see if he can develop into the guy. I mean, people forget, Vinatieri had a really rough start to his career. Gostkowski missed a couple kicks early on in his career. So there is something to be said for a little bit of a learning curve, but it was really bad with Chad Ryland at times. And I'm just looking up Joey Sly's statistics now. He was 34th in the league last year in field goal made percentage, 31st in extra point percentage. So not a great guy, a bottom of the league guy, maybe a guy that can provide a little competition. But this isn't a guy that you're signing because you're pushing Chad Ryland out. This is more like a guy you're signing as an insurance policy in case Chad Ryland completely falls apart.
Yeah. And you know what? We talk about how mentally tough you got to be a quarterback in this league, but you really got to be mentally tough to be a kicker, right? And these kickers, plenty of them, I'm sure, in the practice fields, look like all-stars, right? They look like Vinatieri in the practice field, but you get into a game and it really all comes down to, your focus, your concentration, your ability to stay cool, calm, and collected. And so hopefully they look at Ryland and they say, hey, he had a little bit of rookie jitters, but we see that the kid's got a big leg. We see what he can do in practice. And, we're going to hope that he comes around and solidifies it a little bit this year. So we'll see. But I don't blame them for doing that, given what they invested in him.
Now, your overall grade on this draft, Justin. I'm going to tell you mine first, and then you can give me yours.
Okay.
I'm giving them a B-.
Yeah.
Because I like a lot of what they did, but I just felt like they could have done a little more. I love the pick made. I think that's automatically a great pick. But I just felt like after that, even though I don't hate the moves individually, I just feel like I would have liked him to make one more splash move to kind of so-called weaponize the offense as they said they were going to do, which I don't think they did. We're going to get to that in a second. But I just feel like they didn't make quite enough of a splash in those later rounds. They didn't trade a pick to bring in a legitimate NFL tackle, legitimate NFL wide receiver, which I was kind of hoping for. Still feel like they have some holes on this team. I got to give the draft a B-, even though I love the May pick.
Yeah, and actually that's right about what I was going to say too. I was going to say I'm in between like a C+ and a B-. What I love is the fact that, we talk about the first draft in the post-Belichick era, right? This really kind of was like an anti-Belichick draft, right? They loaded up on offense. One defensive player selected in the entire draft, right? Which is typically, it almost seems like that's it's kind of the opposite with Belichick. Belichick loves to target defense in the draft, right? So they really came into it and they said, look, we're doing our own thing and we're going to address needs. We said that their biggest needs were quarterback, offensive line, and receiver. And even though they didn't make a huge splash, they still went up and they took Drake May at number 3. They went in and they added the 2 young receivers and a couple young O-linemen. And at the end of the day, they really addressed their needs and they identified the holes and they didn't mess around. So I don't like.
I would say that they bought lottery tickets,
right,
for some of their needs, some of the needs we've been talking about for 3 years now, 4 years now. And I think they went out and they bought some lottery tickets, and all those lottery tickets are going to need to hit for them to really have a complete roster this year.
Yeah, totally. I mean, look, there's nobody that they took, including Drake May, is a guaranteed home run success, right? And I also, like we mentioned earlier, I don't like the fact that they traded down in that Jalen Polk pick. I think if they had taken Ladd McConkey in the second round, I think it probably would have been like maybe a B plus even potentially.
Agreed.
So I think that hurt them a little bit, but overall, I'm happy at the fact that they seem to identify the same points of weakness that the rest of us did and say, we're going to go out and we're going to get some depth and we're going to take a shot and see if we can fill some of these holes in some rookie contracts.
I mean, I will say, like, if you're just independent in this draft, devaluing this draft independent of free agency and the rest of the offseason, right? They really did kind of set themselves up for a monumental task, right? With all the holes they have on this roster, just what they did, the way they approach free agency, missing on Calvin Ridley, not really getting alignment. I mean, if you really think about it, was there any way they could get that A? If you really think about it, like, to get that A, you got to walk away and say, we filled all these holes. They had too many holes probably to fill to actually, call this like a grand slam home run situation. They kind of set themselves up into this situation where, it was going to be pretty damn near impossible for them to walk away from this draft and say they did everything that they wanted to do. Now, if some of these lottery tickets work out, all of a sudden Javon Baker in the 4th round becomes the next mid-round receiver, Puka Nacua type or something like that, you're going to take a very different position and stance on what they did in this draft. But I think that's really what they did. They bought some lottery tickets in those mid-rounds. I think they took the best available quarterback in the 1st round, which I love. And then they bought some lottery tickets in those mid-rounds, which I don't hate, but I think a couple of those are going to have to hit for me to say that this was a really successful draft.
Yeah, exactly. Just, just kind of like anything else, we're just going to have to wait and see because we really don't know what's going to come of any of these guys yet.
Exactly. And I mean, who thought Puka Nacua was going to be what he turned into? Now you're looking at the Rams draft from last year very differently than you might have been at the time. Okay, last question, Justin. Just kind of hit on this, bring it up one more time. We were told they were going to weaponize the offense. How do you feel about this roster going into 2024? Now that we know more or less what they have, and that's not to say something couldn't change, but it's almost May. It is May. It's almost June. I mean, they're going to be going to mini camp soon. I think we generally more or less know what this team looks like. I don't think they did a great job this offseason, just to be honest with you. I mean, again, they did the most important thing. They brought in the next quarterback. That is far and away number 1 on the list. You have to do that. You have to get this guy to develop. I don't think they've created a great situation for him. You look at what Caleb Williams is going into in Chicago, what Jaden Daniels is going to in Washington. I think what May is going into is more like what Bryce Young went into than what, than say what CJ Stroud or Caleb Williams is going to. Like, this is still not a good situation. I don't think this offense is particularly weaponized. I think the offensive line is not as bad as some people do, but it's certainly not without its holes or its flaws or its question marks. I mean, this is a C+ team, I think, right now, surrounding Drake May. So I don't think they really did everything they could do to make a good situation for their young quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, this team still, by all intents and purposes, doesn't have a number 1 receiver right now. They have plenty.
Number 2, who's
right?
Number 2 receiver,
Right. I mean, look, I liked what I saw in Pop Douglas's rookie year. I'm going to be really curious to see what some of these rookies are able to do. And one of them, one or even multiple of them may wind up rising to the top and filling that role of a number one or number two receiver eventually. But the point is, at this point in time, you have no clue what you have. And there's nobody that's standing out to me as a number one or even a number two guy yet. So that to me is my biggest issue. I think I do kind of like what they did a little bit on the line. And I'm actually more concerned about their wide receiving core than their offensive line.
110% agree with that, because I feel like even though they got a hole at that left tackle, which might be the most important position, they're actually pretty solid with good depth elsewhere. And I think they're going to be able to kind of make it work on that offensive line and kind of patch up with patchwork or, smoke and mirrors. I feel like they're going to be able to cover up to a certain extent some of their deficiencies. But they got no number one receiver. They got no number two receiver. They don't have a legitimate, proven NFL weapon on this roster right now.
No, and I think oftentimes, I don't think it's a coincidence that when you see rookie quarterbacks come into the league and, kind of make an impact in year one, whether they're high draft picks or guys coming out of the sixth round like a Brock Purdy, the general kind of theme seems to be that they have some good weapons that tend to elevate their play and make them a little bit better right out of the gate, right? And that's not something that we can say that Drake May has.
They still don't have one guy on this team. Like if you're a defensive coordinator on opposition, right?
Yeah.
Who's one guy that worries? There's not one guy on this offense that worries you.
No, not. I would still argue at this point that Hunter Henry is the number one receiving option, the tight end.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
He's a above average tight end.
Right. So it also, to flip it on its head, right? I think it'll be very telling to see if, Drake May does come in at some point this year and play, what he's able to do with a group like this, right? Because if he's able to make these guys look good, and if he's able to look good himself with this group of guys, then that's going to give me a lot of hope for not only his future, but the future of all these guys on the offense. So I think that'll be super interesting to watch too. I think it kind of works both ways, The
one thing they have going for them, I feel like in their wide receiver room, is they do have a lot of depth now.
Right.
KJ Osborne can play in this league. Kendrick Bourne, if he's healthy, can play. I think Pop Douglas can play. They got a lot of number threes. They got like 5 2/3s, type receivers. They got a lot of depth. So, if you want to get into the thing of playing matchups and throwing to the open guy, they're going to be able to do that. I know you got a rookie quarterback. Is he going to be able to read defenses and make those decisions and run that kind of offense?
Right.
That's a lot to ask of a rookie. It's a lot better to have DK Metcalf. I feel like for those young guys, they can just throw it up to. And so I don't know if that's going to work, but that's probably about the only thing I can say they have going for them, is they do have a lot of decent target guys that are decent players.
For sure. And I'm also thinking too, just in terms of, the Patriots' ability to compete and make this, potentially a viable season, for all 18 weeks. Let's look at the fact that, you got Jacoby Brissett as the presumed starter, right? For at least the first half of the year is maybe even more. And I've been sitting there saying, well, I kind of like Jacoby Brissett. I don't want him to be my future quarterback, but I like him as a bridge guy. But even I look at Jacoby Brissett in what he had as success, in the past, and he had guys like Michael Pittman. He had guys like Amari Cooper. He had certified number one receivers on those teams where he was, kind of holding his own, right? So it's going to be it's going to be super interesting to see how he does this year. And, because I would hate for us to fall into another situation like last year where, by halfway through the year, we're already writing off any chance of a postseason. You know what I mean? I know it's not likely, but I would love for us to be able to compete.
Well, that segues right in perfectly into what I was going to sort of wrap up before we move to the NFL draft, with just kind of finish this conversation on the pads with. And that's look, what's going to happen this year? The 2024, what do you see as playing out for this team? I'll tell you right now, Justin, here's my take. I think May is going to play earlier than people expect him to, because I think that he's going to prove he's the best player. to be honest with you. And I think they're going to be compelled to play him. That might not necessarily be week 1, but I think by week 6, Drake May will be the starting quarterback on this team. And right now, I see this team as like a 6 to 7 win team, best case scenario, assuming everyone stays healthy. I don't see a huge upside. I'd love to say that they're going to be in it in November or December. I don't think that's totally out of the realm of possibility. I love the over at 4.5, but I wouldn't say that this is a team that I think is very likely to be winning 9 or 10 games and making the playoffs this year for sure.
Yeah, I would agree. And one of the things that I like about Drake May, which we've said earlier and we've said before, is the fact that I think you can put him out there a little earlier, even if he doesn't have a built-in offense ready for him to step in and succeed. Because I think this is the type of guy who has the mental attributes and the mental toughness that he's not going to get discouraged from a couple of bad games or struggling a little bit right out the gate. I think he's going to be able to handle it a lot better than some of these other guys, or even like a Mac Jones or somebody like that. So I'm not as worried about putting Drake May out there and seeing what you got necessarily before the offense is ready for him to step into that role. Because again, I think he's resilient.
I mean, assuming you can protect him, because you don't want to get him killed.
Right, you don't want to get him hurt. Right, for sure.
That might be. Unless he's a total disaster with his mechanics, I think that sometimes the best way to learn is on the job. And this just whole situation, it reminds me a lot of Bledsoe's rookie year, which you weren't even born yet, but they brought in Scott Sequels to be the bridge quarterback, very similar to what they did with Jacoby Brissett. Sequels was a career journeyman guy. He wasn't very good. The plan was for him to start, but it just became so evident right from the beginning that Bledsoe was just that much better, and the team was better in there. They started off 1-11 that year, by the way, and Bledsoe did get hurt for a few games in the middle, but you could see that they had something with Drew, and then they won their last 4 games, and they beat a couple pretty good teams in there, and it became pretty clear that they were going to be good the following year. And I think that for them this year, I'd say the same thing. Look, if they go win 4, 5, 6, 7 games, but you walk away from this thing in January and you're saying, this kid May, he came on real strong. He looks good. We're going to be able to put some pieces around him and we're going to be good next year. Then that's a win. You're success. You can have a 5, because you now have the quarterback. You can go out and win 5, 6 games and call it a successful year if it looks right.
Yeah. Exactly. So yeah, it's going to be super interesting to see what happens. Again, I'm kind of in the boat with you that I'm not expecting this to go out, for the Patriots to go out and be a playoff team, or, really, be anywhere near, what we'd like to see them be, down the road. But then again, like I'm ready to be surprised. Again, one of the things that's exciting, at least about this team, is even though the prospects maybe aren't super high for this year, there's a lot of unknowns, right? And within those unknowns themselves kind of creates a level of excitement because there's a lot to still find out and there's a lot of potential to be discovered.
And who knows? Maybe our opinion about some of these targets and these guys they've brought in, KJ Osborne, Pop Douglas, these guys continue to develop. Maybe they show that they're much better players over the course of the season than we think they are right now. And that's what you got to hope for, that you got a few diamonds in the rough, and then you can plug in sort of some pieces next year in the offseason. Okay, and then one last very quick thing. We're going to talk briefly about the draft. Christian Barmore signed. Just want to be comprehensive. Can't ignore that.
Yeah.
Got to mention it. Love that they're signing their own guys, and I love that they signed Barmore. Guy's a total beast. Don't make him wait. Pay the guy. It's going to win you miles in the locker room, which I think is going to be important when they face some adversity this year. You've got to have allies in the locker room. If you're Gerard Mayo, Barmore deserves that second contract as much as anyone that's come through this program in the last 10, 15 years. I think it was a great signing, smart business. Glad they took care of him.
Yeah, I agree. He's someone that we've both liked, and he's both at times. We both said at times that he's looked like he could potentially be a stud, right? And I think he's not even at his full potential yet. So I'm excited that he's locked up and he's going to be here for a bit. And that defense for the time being is our best asset, right? So I think keeping that defense deep, keeping them talented, being able to create pressure up front, I think that's going to be huge for this team if they want to compete in games.
No doubt about it. And I think you saw last year Barmore almost like a franchise level kind of player.
Yeah.
At times, coming probably their best player last year, right? So I'm glad they got him under contract. Okay, Justin, let's go through the draft. A couple more things. We kind of glanced over this last time. I thought we could take 10 or 15 minutes and just kind of talk a little bit more about that first round because we kind of blasted through some stuff. I don't know if you have any things that are particularly interesting to you. I was going to bring up a couple things. First of all, any further thoughts on the Caleb Williams pick at number 1? The more I think about it here, this guy, I'm going to call it right now. We hit on this a little bit last week. I just think he's going to be a bust. He's going to a terrific situation. And, that team should be able to compete for the playoffs right from the beginning. You look at what they have on that roster around him. Terrific talent offensively. I think Williams is going to be the problem. I don't love the player. Don't get it. He's 2 inches smaller than Mahomes. He's like 20 pounds lighter than Mahomes. I know he's got a good arm. Don't they all have good arms for the most part? I don't think his arm is that great. I just don't get why the world is so enamored with this player. I don't think he's any more talented or likely to succeed than any other first-round quarterback that's been drafted the last 5 years.
Yeah, I kind of, I kind of agree. Look, I've kind of said it from the beginning. I didn't really understand the hype behind Caleb Williams. I know he kind of had a big junior year at USC, but I think it's always a red flag when a guy comes out and follows up in college, and regresses. I think for all intents and purposes, he regressed a little bit in his senior year. And not only that, but I cannot see his leadership skills, his mentality, just kind of the way he carries himself. I can't see that being effective or even respected in an NFL locker room, to be completely honest.
And he's going to a rabid fan base, a hungry fan base that is hungry for wins, Super Bowls, and good quarterback play because they haven't had any of them in a while.
Yeah, and the expectations are high. And you know what? I really want to see, and you know what? Look, I think it'd be good for the league if Caleb Williams is a good quarterback and he pans out. Agreed. You know what I mean? So Agreed. I'm not rooting for the guy to fail by any means, but I also want to see what happens to him when his back's against the wall a little bit and this Bears team's facing a little bit of adversity. Is he going to be the type of guy who starts, snapping at reporters and putting the blame on his teammates and, making remarks about his coaches, or, is he going to be the type of guy who tweaks an ankle and sits out for 4 weeks? I'm just very curious, what is actually going to become of him. But again, just because I don't feel good about it. I wouldn't feel confident if I was a Bears fan. And I think there's a lot of cause for concern, but again, I'm rooting for him because I think it's good for the league if he turns out to be good. And I want to see the Chicago Bears be a good team. That,
I agree with that. I think it'd be great for the league if the Bears got a franchise quarterback finally, because they've never had one. And I'm rooting for Caleb Williams because I think he's a terrific young man. I think he's a nice guy. I love how he presented himself on draft night. I'm rooting for the guy. But I got to call it like I see it. I just think the hype is a little out of proportion to the actuality of the player. Okay, how about let's go to the Chargers pick. One of the debates that we had when we did our pre-draft show was whether they would go wide receiver or tackle. Now, I'm going to claim victory on this debate, Justin, because I told you, Jim Harbaugh is an old school football guy. He's going to build that team in an old school way. And he took arguably the best player in the draft at 5, and Joe Alt, the tackle. Your thoughts on that pick? Did the Chargers make a mistake in not giving a potential generational weapon to Justin Herbert and Malik Nabers?
No, I don't think so, because I think I think Joe Alt is just as generational, if not more generational than Malik Nabers. That's an offensive line they've struggled a little bit. And I know that they got rid of Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, but that's not exactly like a devoid wide receiver room. They got Quentin Johnson, who was a high draft pick last year, right? They got a couple other guys in there, guys like Josh Palmer, Jalen Guyton, guys that are, middling level receivers, 2 and 3 caliber receivers, right?
And they drafted Ladd McConkey. So it's
yeah, exactly. So at the end of the day, I think they're really, I think that's a vote of confidence in Justin Herbert too, because I think I think they're saying, hey, if we can protect this kid and we can give him the time he needs and let him cook, that he's gonna be able to take these receivers and do something with them. So I think it was a good pick for the franchise. I think it was a good pick for the quarterback, and I think it was a vote of confidence in their quarterback.
Yeah, and I kind of like that it still says, like, look, it's still football. It's not 7-on-7. You still need to block. Right. And probably one of the biggest problems that's been holding Justin Herbert back is the fact that they haven't had a stable, consistent offensive line, even though they have had good receivers. So I love that Harbaugh comes in and kind of brings that old school Michigan, San Francisco 49ers mentality that he was successful in other places with, and drafts a tackle at a time when everyone's going receiver, speed. It's still football. I like the pick too for that reason. Number 6, the Giants, Justin. They just can't quit Daniel Jones. This is one place we differed in our mock drafts. Now you can claim victory on this one. I think you had them taking Malik Neighbors, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
I kind of went back and forth, but I had them picking JJ McCarthy here. The Giants just cannot give up on Daniel Jones.
No, they can't. I get it. Not in the sense that I think there's any hope for him to turn himself into a franchise quarterback, but I get, you made your bed, you paid the guy what, $40 million a year, whatever it is.
They doubled down on their mistake. They didn't sign him to a second contract.
Right, exactly. They doubled down on their mistake. You signed the guy to a second contract. And I think at this point, they're rolling with the punches. They're saying, look, he's here. He's our quarterback, and now we're going to do everything in our power to give him the weapons that he may need to take that next step. And from their standpoint, I don't hate the move, because I say, like, look, there'd be a lot of dead cap space if you would have just cut him and get rid of him, right? Even if you did bring in JJ McCarthy, it's not like he has a ton of weapons there to support himself, right? Like if you don't go out and take Malik Neighbors, I mean, like, that's another wide receiver room that's filled with wide receiver 2s and 3s. Saquon Barkley's no longer there. It's not the best offensive line. So, like, I look at it and I say, like, okay, like, what were you better off doing? Were you better off bringing in a rookie quarterback and putting him in a really tough situation? Or are you better off trying to go up and take a stud receiver to hopefully, get that next step out of your $40 million a year quarterback?
Well, that's one thing you can give the Patriots a lot of credit for, because they didn't double down on their Mac Jones screw up. And, the Patriots had every opportunity to make another round of excuses for Mac Jones, like the Giants do for Daniel Jones every year, right? And they got that number 3 pick in the draft. It would have been so easy for the Pats to just break out the excuse machine for Mac Jones and just draft Marvin Harrison and Malik Neighbors and roll back with it. But they were clear. They were decisive. They got rid of him. They moved on. They didn't double down on the mistake. The Giants can't do that with Daniel Jones. They just can't do it with him. They continue to double down on this mistake. They signed the guy last year. This year, now they're passing on the opportunity to bring in another franchise quarterback and bringing in a wide receiver. I get it on Malik Neighbors. The guy's a stud. He's a beast. He was maybe the best receiver in the draft. Some people thought he was better than Harrison. I don't know. Time will tell. But who's going to get him the ball? Is Daniel Jones good enough to get Malik Neighbors the ball consistently? Right. What have we seen from Daniel Jones in the last 5 years that makes us think that he can be a franchise quarterback? At what point do you have to stop making excuses for this player? The Giants now, I think, have eliminated the final vestiges of like excuse island for Daniel Jones. So it is like put up or shut up time for this player. And I think that it is probably going to be a mistake that they look back on and say, we had the chance to draft another quarterback and we did it. And now we're stuck looking for that guy still.
100%. And you know what? I think part of what they're doing as well could be the fact that they say, look, we're New York. We play in a big market, right? It's an attractive market to come be a part of. And And we need to start putting the supporting foundation in place for if and when we finally do move on from Daniel Jones, because maybe they're looking at it and saying, look, we're an attractive place to come play football. We want to build a roster of talent that will attract that next free agent quarterback, or would make someone eager for us to go and trade for them and bring them in. So I look at it and I say, look, they're killing two birds at one stone. They're trying to get the most out of their clear mistake in Daniel Jones, and they're also trying to set themselves up for, when they got to replace him in a few years. They're looking to build that core a little bit, make it a more attractive landing option for another quarterback.
Next one I want to talk about, Justin, is I think another really interesting pick we can talk about Penix at 8. I don't know. We could talk about that for a whole show. I don't know. Do you want to talk about Penix? We talked a little bit about it last time.
I mean, yeah, if you want to touch on Penix real quick, I mean, like my thing with him.
It's the most interesting pick in the draft
hands down.
Years. I mean, years. Yeah. I love it. Yeah. I don't know what you think. I love it.
I mean, I didn't like it at first. It's growing on me a little bit, right? But it's just so weird because a lot of it you just look at it and there's a lot that doesn't make sense, right? I get it. You don't want to be in quarterback purgatory like they have been for so long. So, you're hoping that you bring in the next guy so that, if something were to happen to Kirk or when Kirk leaves, you got that next guy man up, ready to go. But by the same token, I look at it and I'm like, your first mistake was bringing in a guy like Kirk Cousins for that much money at this point in his career, coming off of an Achilles injury, right? I mean, the guy, for the love of God, like, he's had Justin Jefferson, he's had TJ Hawkinson, he's had some really good weapons. And like, this is a guy that's shown time in and time out that his ceiling is a first round of the playoffs type of guy, right? Like that's pretty much his ceiling. Like, so you brought in a guy, I think, at a vulnerable point in his career whose potential has already been determined with a defined ceiling, and you brought him in, you paid him a ton of money. I didn't like that. Then you look at the fact that, well, this is a team that if Kirk Cousins did pan out this year, he's got a bunch of weapons. He's coming into a good situation. That offense should be highly improved. But you still have a lot of holes in defense, right? And I know they went on to address the defense, in the rest of the draft. But there's just a lot of it that I think, to me, tells me that this Falcons team is still trying to figure a lot of things out. It's just a lot that doesn't make sense to me. Do I like the fact that they went out and got their guy in Michael Penix? Sure, I like that. But it's and do I like the fact that this hopefully is going to be a team that won't have to worry about their quarterback for the next 5 to 10 years? Like, yeah, that's cool too. But I just think there's a lot surrounding the Falcons of this pick that are reasonable to question.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of things there's a huge downside to doing things the way the Falcons did. But I think that the point people are missing is that if you want to make an omelet, you have to break some eggs, you have to make some sacrifices. And the Falcons did not, after being in quarterback purgatory for the last few years since Matt Ryan retired, did not want to find themselves in a situation where they were shut out of musical chairs game of the NFL quarterback carousel like they had been. So they went aggressive after Kirk Cousins, and they guaranteed that they'll at least be viable at the position. And then when the draft broke the right way, they had the opportunity to pass on what they believe is a generational player in Michael Penix, and they took that opportunity. You lose the chance to get a defensive player. You piss off Kirk Cousins. You waste some of your cap space on a quarterback you might not even need in a year or two. Fine, those are all downsides. But if you walk away from this with the next guy, it is more than worth it for you as a franchise. Then you're at the top of the league for the next 10 years. I think that given the climate and the landscape of today's NFL and the quarterback-driven nature of the league, I absolutely love this move. I just think, yeah, of course there's a downside, but if you ever want to get anywhere, you've got to take some gambles.
Yeah, you do. You got to take some gambles. And I'm playing my own devil's advocate. If you know that Kirk Cousins has a limited ceiling, you go out and you try to find a guy that has a potentially higher ceiling.
That's right.
And from what we've been hearing, there's a lot of hype around Michael Penix. I mean, there were multiple teams that were looking to trade up and take him. So, he clearly wound up with the first round grade for his talents. And, there is a lot of potential there. And, they're hoping that, hey, we found a guy that can not only serve as a viable backup if anything happens to Cousins, but he's also going to have a higher upside too in the future. So,
I would say the same thing, Justin, about the 12th pick in the Denver Broncos, which we haven't talked about yet. And I definitely want to bring that up because I know we're running short on time. But I love that they went after Bo Nix too. Everyone hates Bo Nix, and I don't get it. I don't think look, if Sean Payton, who has won a Super Bowl, feels strongly about Bo Nix as the guy, and you're the Denver Broncos, you're a franchise that just was on the losing end of one of the worst trades in NFL history, then you've got to roll the dice and take some gambles to break yourself out of the quagmire, the mess you put yourself in. And I think rolling the dice on a guy like Bo Nix is probably one of the only ways that you're going to get out of it. Now, Bo Nix may suck, and you may suck the next 3 or 4 years, but that was going to happen anyways because you put yourself in a bad situation with the Russell Wilson trade. If you roll the dice on Bo Nix and this guy can play, then guess what? All of a sudden, you're putting him in a situation that isn't that bad. A good coach, a couple good receivers. Now you're plugging in a quarterback that can play. Now all of a sudden, that situation in Denver that looks so dire because of the fallout of the Russell Wilson trade, now you're actually looking like you're not that bad of a team for the next couple of years. I thought it was an aggressive move, and I thought it was the right move for the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, well, they needed to do it, right? I mean, they put themselves in a tough position cap-wise where, their next quarterback almost had to come through the draft. You know what I mean? So they needed somebody in a rookie contract. By the same token, they also traded away so much draft capital in that Russell Wilson trade that I can see them being hesitant to say, hey, we're going to throw the farm at one of these teams in the top 10 and try to move up. We're going to see who falls to us and take our chances with that. And, they took Bo Nix. I like it. They also went and doubled down and took Bo Nix's number one wide receiver out of Oregon too. I forget his name. But, giving him a little bit of help and familiarity. And, this is a guy that a lot of people are saying has a lot of similarities to a Drew Brees, who Sean Payton had success with, won a Super Bowl with. So
exactly. And the only way they're getting out of this is by doing something like that. Okay, we got 3 minutes left. I'm going to give you a couple quick takes. Let's just go lightning round here. Yep. Bears go Rome Odunze. They got 3 number one wide receivers at this point. I mean, I don't know. I think they probably should have gone defense here. I don't know what your thoughts are.
I mean, I thought they were going to go defense, but you know what? Keenan Allen's old. He has injury history.
Yeah, that's fair.
And you're bringing in a rookie quarterback. You're trying to give him the best situation possible.
DJ Moore, is he really I know he's a good receiver, but is he really as special as people say? I don't know. Maybe that's why they did it.
Exactly.
The Jets made an uncharacteristically sensible pick. I was sure they were going to spall for Brock Bowers. Yeah. If there was ever a franchise that would take the cheese on that guy, I thought it was them. They made a good pick, I thought, with the tackle.
Yeah, I think that was kind of my toss up with them too. Do they go tackle? Do they go tight end? And I'm glad that they went tackle because you know what? I think after what they saw last year is that, look, they brought in Aaron Rodgers. They need him if they want any chance at competing this year. And they got to do everything they can to keep him healthy and upright.
The Raiders, on the other hand, did take Brock Bowers, far and away the most puzzling pick of the draft. That's the one everyone should be complaining about. You took a tight end last year. Now you take another tight end. Yeah, that team's going to suck. They could have the best tight end room in the league. It's not going to help them.
Yeah, I think that was a panic pick. The Raiders were one of those teams that wanted to trade up and take Michael Penix. I think after the trade, exactly, they got stuck. After the trade didn't work out, I think they panicked and they just said, well, there goes our plan. Let's just take the best guy available. And that was Brock Bowers at the time. But it also happens to be the player that they needed the least.
You could argue that the Seahawks at 16 got the best defensive player in the draft. And the defensive tackle there, Thomas. What's his name? Brian Thomas? No, Brian Thomas is the wide receiver. What's the name of the defensive lineman? The Seahawks. But he was the top-rated defensive lineman in the damn draft, and they got him at 16, which is just like amazing draft value. His name is Byron Murphy.
Yeah, Byron Murphy. And then the fact that Jershawn Newton fell all the way to the Commanders, I thought that was another crazy pick too, as well. This was really a draft. It was very top heavy in the offense, both at quarterback, wide receiver, and tackle, and a lot of good defensive players wound up slipping.
Love that the Bengals took a tackle at 18 to protect Joe Burrow as much as you can.
Yep.
Right? That was a sensible pick. Love that pick. And Trevor Lawrence, again, totally out of excuses. Jaguars grab a receiver at age 19, first pick, Brian Thomas. There's no more excuses for Trevor Lawrence. He's out. He's done.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, the book's been out on him, but you know what? Give people another year to come around. I think he's just going to continue to prove how mediocre he is.
Well, if he can't get it done with that group around him and that coach, I mean, I think that does say a lot about at some point, the Trevor defenders, and there are so many of them out there in the media, so many fans out there that just can't get past it. At some point, they're going to have to just move on.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Justin. Well, that's all the time we have. We're going to wrap it up, right? You got any final thoughts, my man?
No, it was just I'm glad it's all over with and done with now, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the spring and summer. Curious to see what comes out.
Next landmark will be the schedule release. I think that happens in 2 weeks. We will definitely record an episode on that around that time. If there's any major news, you'll hear from us again. Otherwise, watch for our written content on our page. And I want to thank everyone that listened today. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, iTunes. We're everywhere. Thank everyone that listened. Have a great day and enjoy this beautiful spring day, everyone.